Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensie Owl Bob. That's me, your Sensie Owl Bob, your griot to tell you a story. So today, Saturday, the 7th or 8th or whatever it is of August, it now begins. I've been talking about the big splat. Are you a guinea pig? Or are you a billy goat? Or are you just the sheep? The sheeple. Are you a decider of your own direction of your life? Pretty much, no. No one is. We are so domesticated. We are so, our religions, all of them, are based on a delusion of a demigod, a little child. Just think of, look at Donald Trump, and I'm calling him a demigod, but he thinks he is, right? And that's a delusion, right? Only because he's susceptible. Because his heart has turned to stone. And what does he say? I am a stable genius, right? What is that? That means he's always in his cottage cheese brain. And that's pretty much all of us. Right? We're all motivated by our fleshy habits, right? Oh, I want to eat ice cream. I want to eat candy. I want to eat popcorn. That's all I've been doing today. Mm-hmm. Tasty, though. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if you do it once in a while, right? I haven't really had popcorn in years, right? But I'm very disciplined about kind of what I buy. And if you don't buy popcorn in the store, then you're not going to eat it at home, right? Things like that. You don't buy candy at the store, you're not going to eat it at home, at all, right? But I felt like it, so I bought like 32 pieces of caramel chocolate. That's only 32. Now, if I eat those, let's say in a little bit here, there, in the next 4 days, not a big deal. Eat it all at once, not a good thing. But if I don't eat it again, I might get right now, but I won't die from it. But if I did it every day, I'd die from it. If I ate popcorn, the store-bought processed crap that you threw in the microwave, you have 1 or 2 bags, not going to kill you. You do 1 or 2 bags every day, your colon would turn into concrete, right? Right now, it might be good. It might be like, a little scrubbing brush in my colon. So that's it. Here it is Saturday. I was going to do a bunch of things, laundry, this, blah, blah, blah. No, I decided a friend called who I hadn't talked to in a long while. And often I always pray for him because he's going through a difficult time. And so we talked. We talked 4 hours, right? So that's good. When he ended up on that phone call, he was in a lot, he was in a more positive state. And now it's like a stress test. He's standing up to that stress test. And that is good, right? Here, the sun is in my face. I'm getting my vitamin D. There's the sun right there. It's setting. This happens every night. If it's not raining or cloudy, the sun comes in like this and hits my face. Right? But I'm of an age that soon I will not be in front of your screen. So appreciate your Sensie Owl Bob right here, right now. Right? Good morning, good evening. Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland. It's 5 minutes and 7 seconds. And So my little skin is this because I kind of trimmed my beard down a little bit, and I was eating my beard, so I kind of trimmed it around my lips, and maybe I've drunk too much coffee or did something. My blood pressure's a little high, my blood sugar's a little high, but that's because I've been basically eating crap. But our whole planet has been eating crap for the last 200 years. And we've been living in crap for the last million years. We live on a garden planet, and we treat it like shit. Now, it's really the garden planet, it's okay, because the worse we treat it, the worse we're treating ourselves. Like burning hydrocarbons in trucks and buses and airplanes. People go about, the carbon footprint, it's warming the planet. Not so much. But it is poisoning the planet, right? So, yeah, and we've killed I don't know how many species. But all of that basically lessens the value of our life and makes our life more like living in hell than in heaven. And but that's okay, because this planet's it's been here like 6 billion years. We've only been here, I don't know, not long. And if we take ourselves out by, making AI that destroys us, or keep having wars so it destroys us, if you can't sense that there is something outside our own stupid moron self, precipitating, we're being used, abused, you name it. Go watch David Icke. He'll tell you all about the reptiles, Go talk to Joseph P. Farrell. He'll give it to you. Go talk to Cliff High. He'll give you some info. Good old dark journalist, Go talk to Dr. D there. So, bottom line, this is very simple. You don't have to do this. You don't. I have to do all this because, got to pay the bills. I live in a real world. Blah, 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 blah. No. You can manifest beauty, love, peace, and understanding. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, man? So here we are, right? No one wants to hear this. Only one person listens. Not a single. No one cares for peace, love, and understanding. No, I want war. I want death. I want blood. I want scrotums in my mouth. I mean, that's pretty much what our military-industrial complex is all about. Scrotums in your mouth, right? So, I've just been watching Babylon 5. That's a pretty good show. It's like maybe almost 20 years old. And it has, whoever wrote it and produced it and visualized it had a pretty, because they're talking about stuff, that was 20 years old and they're supposed to be 2025. And so it's quite interesting because they're talking about things then that's supposed to be 2025, but they wrote it back in the 90s or early O's. And it's kind of what is happening right here, right now. All the different people on the stage are going after each other. They have nothing, Why does the Zionist state want to kill everyone? They don't really have to. They could be I was in Israel in the 1970s when it was just a postage stamp little country it was. And it was very nice. People were very nice. You could go in Palestine, you could just ride your bike in there. There were no walls, no gates, no IDF. Et cetera, right? So not everyone had a gun, and no one was thinking everyone was after them. But that psychology had been there since the day it was born, right? Because it came out of English oppression, right? And, the Zionist movement was something, it wasn't like in the Bible. God didn't invent Zionism, And most Zionists, they aren't genetic Jews. They're not part of the 12 tribes. They're Europeans that if you check their DNA, it goes back maybe 5 generations, if that, to somebody who was some kind of Slav who thought, the Jews were coming through. They had a lot of money. Maybe I'll be one of them. I'll see what I can get, right? Now, don't believe a word I say. This stuff is pretty much um, just look at it. You know, Scott Ritter, Jimmy Haifong, um, the two Chinese professors. There are a lot of people out there. Larry, um, Colonel Doug. There are a lot of people. Now, they all have their own biased point of view, but if you listen to enough of everybody, you can get a good picture. You listen to what's being, in Haras, the Israeli newspaper. Then you go listen to Bibi and Du Bois and his whole club and listen to what they say, right? Just listen to what they say. See if there's any truth. It's really simple to tell. What I love about Donald Trump is that you know what he's saying, right? He lies to his teeth, but he lies so much. All you have to do is look 180 degrees, and that's what's going on. So that I just love that. Now he's scamming. He is, he's just a huckster, right? And so, oh yeah, we're going to bomb Iran into non-existence. We're going to end their civilization. Oh no, we're having really fruitful peace. Oh, we're going to bomb. Oh no, we're going to have peace. We're going to open up oh no, we're going to bomb them take all their. And all he's doing is ping-ponging the markets up and down and up and down and up and down. And the dollar is worthless. We spend 15% of our GDP just to pay the interest on the money to borrow it. Now, if the dollar wasn't the, reserved currency paying for oil for the world, we'd be toast already. I mean, we've already gone past the line of toastdom like 50 years ago. But, between Breckenridge and basically America being the cowboy of the planet, and we're about to lose our military. And what's going to happen is between the war in Europe and the war in Middle East, we're going to, first of all, it's been shown that our weapons, like the Patriots, they don't work. That doesn't work. And we've run out of them, and we have no, weapons that we can shoot at our enemy from far away. Our cruise missiles, our tomahawks, our all the rest of the weapons that. But we have these other like Tesla toys that are off stage left, and we have this entity. If you ever watched any of the Marvel movies, that's exactly, Hail Hydra. Who do you think is doing all this? Now, the question is, where did Hydra come from? Yes, it's Nazi born, but there's lots of other ingredients to it, right? So there are many, many, many things that go bump in the night. You ever see that movie, Hellboy, right? Where the Nazis were opening up doors. So were the United States, The Philadelphia experiment is like totally that. They were developing dimensional toys, like at the turn of the century. Nikola Tesla was playing around with all this stuff. And why is MJ12 and COG and all those entities, why was Kennedy whacked? Basically because he was going to blow the whistle on all of this and say, hey, we have technology that can give us free energy. We don't have to have wars anymore. We can put the weapons away. There's enough stuff on this planet for everyone to live freely. He was about to make that speech. That's why he got whacked. So, and it's in all the movies and books, and it's not like I'm blowing the whistle on anything. I am not a whistleblower. What I am is a loyal opposition, meaning I'm a human being that realizes that I'm a spiritual being in this little meat puppet here. This meat puppet ain't me, when you are born, the one thing you do know is that you're going to die one day, right? So I've lived an amazing life, right? I'm 75 years and I've had an amazing life. And I I was a real sick kid. I should have died when I was, 2, but I should have died when I was born. I was born a blue baby, right? And I was a little peanut of a kid my whole freaking life. Where's it? Can I get at it? No. Let's see. Can you see it? There I am. Look at that little guy, right? And I am a standing ground, and the American flag's in the way, but that was my first anti-gravity device. Right? I was hovering aboard of wood with 2 ferret bands around it, and one I used a bow and arrow to shoot a wire about 50 feet up in the air on top of this pine tree, and I had put there was a metal like water pipe, and I was standing on it, and I had my bare feet on it, and I had a wire on the other side of the dielectric, and the frigging board that weighed about 60 pounds was floating in the air, right? And I did that when I was 6, maybe 8, somewhere in there. I think it was before the Nazi nun murdered me, right? So, and there's the sun. It's just about to set behind the mountain. When you look at through the shade, you can see the sun better and the different frequencies of light. So I'm just a cheeky monkey, and yet I know a lot about things that most people have no idea about. And there's enough to save this earth, right? And there's some really good people here who are doing their best to save the earth. And all you have to do is pray, right? Pray to source, right? Go online, go look at anything on the Essenes, go look on anything at the Gnostic papers, go look at the, Jesus, and he was a smart guy. Why didn't he write? Well, he did. Go read the part of the Bible written by Jesus, by Timothy, by Thomas, and John. The same John who wrote about the end of times, he wrote some very other interesting stuff. And also, read what Mary Magdalene had to say about the whole thing, because she was the one who bankrolled the whole thing. 3 years are going, from town to town. That costs money. Going into a motel, getting breakfast, buying new sandals. The bottom line is nothing that you think is the way it is, right? And all I have to do, I got whacked upside the head by this nun. So my orbit of my eye was turned sideways, right? So I see things, like over here, right? That most people can't see. I see other frequencies of light that most people. Plus, she broke the little stirrup in my ear. I hear frequencies, not voices, but frequencies, and things far away. I have like a Doppler radar ear, And the further things away are, I can hear better with this. Closer they are, I have to use this ear to listen to you speak, right? She broke my jaw, so that's why I kind of have a strange kind of voice, sideways kind of voice. I slur certain things. And as a little kid, after I had that trauma, I stuttered for a year. But I was blessed to be put into not a seminary, but a sanctuary, a Maryknoll sanctuary. And they put me back together. And so that's why I've been here my whole life. Being able to see things that most people can't. I have eyes to see. What Jesus said, those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Well, I have eyes to see and ears to hear, right? So I am very aware, right? Consciously aware I am. It's what you need to be, right? You got to see that moron 4 blocks away. And so by the time they get to where you are, you're already gone. So you don't have to deal with it, right? Don't let it get in your grill. The other thing that gets things in your grill is your emotions. If you take things personal, funny Wi-Fi name you've seen, whatever. Anyway, so you want to make a comment? There's two of you there. How about some thumbs up? Let's have some more subscribers. Let's get this party started. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. I mean, not just not interacting here with. I mean, the most fun is to be part of the cadre. When we have a show that runs pretty long and people talk and people interact, the show is fun. It's interesting, right? But if we just sit back there and like just scroll me, now go look at all the past shows I've done. I have such a diversity of stuff on there. Go take a look at it. Use it like a roulette wheel. Just like spin it, like go and watch that one. Watch it for it's interesting. Watch the whole thing. If it's not, just take a few seconds of it. But its bottom line is, what are you doing with your life? Let's see you kind of come alive. Let's see you interact with your community. Let's see you, because the only thing that's going to save you, because shit is going to hit the fan like you cannot friggin' believe. And it's all, not going to be, oh, God did it, or no, it's because a bunch of people, and it's not the usual suspects, people you have no clue. I mean, first of all, you have to realize someone said, you shouldn't say anything because you don't have the right to talk because you don't vote. Well, why should I vote when the choice is, just the color of sprinkles on my donut? Difference between Democrats and Republicans is zero. Back when Donnie came in, the whole thing that the girl with the bad voice had running against Donnie. He's a fascist. He's a mean guy. Blah, 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 blah. Right? No, there were a lot of things they could have spoken to, like what did he do to our economy? What did he do to our situation within the construct of our allies, etc.? What did he do when COVID hit? Didn't really touch on anything except he's a bad guy, he's crazy. And then what did Donnie say about the girl with the bad voice? Oh, she's a stupid bitch and she's crazy. That is not something to choose from. And the Democrats, Donnie gets in, right at the bat, right that first week, they had not voted on a budget, right? So what do they do when they don't vote on a budget? Since like Second World War, we have not ever had a balanced budget or even voted on one. We just keep kicking the can down the road, saying, okay, we'll pay for the next 4 months, right? That's how we've gotten a $70 trillion deficit with a T. And, we don't even know if it's that, because no one, like the Defense Department, has never done a single audit since World War I. They spend money Bill Clinton kind of balanced the budget before he left office, right? How did he do it? He got rid of the safety net. That's why, before Bill Clinton got into office, there were about 1 million people in jail. When he left, there were 7 million people in jail. We had, national health care for the poor and for the indigent and for, our veterans. We don't have any of that anymore. You go to jail. We have more people in jail than the whole world put together. Even the really nasty countries like, those countries that put people in jail without even giving them a day in court. That's America. We're number one at that. We're number one. So, really, there was a Methodist minister who, when the Americans freed the death camps, he kind of came out looking like a walking skeleton. And, he fattened himself up and he basically, and he was German, right? And he basically later, a few years later, started writing books. And one of the things he said that became kind of a well-known thing was, when the National Socialist Party got in, I didn't really care. I wasn't political. The white mark republic, the most democratic, Germany was the most democratic, most sophisticated, cultured, educated country in Europe of that time, between 1920 and 1933. But they kept getting in trouble economically, so and that's because France and England wanted to punish Germany, right? So when the Depression happened, they actually did pretty good, but France again, tried to punish them. So anyway, this Methodist minister basically said, so I was not involved in politics. And when they took the communists and the socialists away, I didn't care. I didn't know any communists or socialists. When they took the gay people away, I didn't know any gay people. Or I didn't really know I knew. Anyway, when it came for the Jews, I didn't know any Jews. I didn't care, right? When it came after the Catholics, I didn't know any Catholics. I didn't care. And when it came for me, there was no one to care for me. And that's where America is right now. It used to be the beloved country, thought as a harbinger of democracy and fair play, but we haven't ever played fair. I mean, ask any Native American, ask any African American, right? Ask any woman. Women didn't get to vote until 1928. They couldn't have their own credit card until 1965. Because when they voted into the Voting Rights Act, somebody said, oh, well, shouldn't we give some of those rights to women? Like, they can have their own bank account, they can have their own credit card. Anyway, go see the movie or read the book Handmaid's Tale, right? Hunger Games. All of, any of those dystopian films. That's where we are now. But it's just that we believe, look at Donald Trump. What is he but a pig with lipstick on? What was, Joe Biden? A pig with lipstick on. What was Obama? Pig with lipstick on it. The Who had the song, Don't Get Fooled Again, the new boss, same as the old boss. What's going to happen is that Donald Trump, he's not, someone to scare. He's doing all this stuff right in front of our face. Why aren't we doing anything? Like I said, the Democrats, the first week they could have done what they did a year later, meaning they could have frozen up the government, right? But they didn't. But if they had done that in that first week when they kicked the economic can down the road for another 6 months, it gave Donnie and Neon Husk and Douche and the Heritage Foundation the opportunity to just rip and tear this everything apart, which is not a bad thing. All of that instrument that I call the deep state, that is our government. It's there not to service you, but to service the rich. They ripped it apart. The only bad thing is that they left all the parts that, gave like the great, perfect, beautiful bill. It gave like a $20 trillion tax break to the trillionaires. It's like these people are making this money not because they invented anything or made a product that's really great. We don't have capitalism. This ain't a capitalist state. This is crony capitalism, right? And the next step from crony capitalism is fascism. Capitalism is when capital controls the state. Communism is when the state owns the capital, right? Fascism is when corporations own and control the state. Now, that's been in shape since World War II, since the National Security Act in 1947. That's when things really changed, right? And why Kennedy got whacked was that he knew this. He knew his whole family were mobsters and were part of it because our government is the mob. We are like the Khazarian mob. That's why, Israel owns us. AIPAC owns us. And it's not like they did it with a snap of the fingers. They've been doing it for 30 years with our own frigging money. That means there is an entity that you don't see. It's like, and that's the movie, the guy who wrote the book, Wizard of Oz, right? That was basic. He was an economist. And he was, he was talking blue in the face. Hey, we can't keep borrowing money. We can't keep doing this. We can't keep doing that. Then you know, Depression collapse of 1929 happens, and he had been screaming about it for 10 years. And he got fired, so he sat down and wrote a kid's book about it, and that's, follow the yellow brick road. What is that? That's all those bricks, right? Gold bullion, right? At the end, when they're in the chamber with the Wizard of Oz and the big heads up there, blah, 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 and steam is coming out of his ears and fire out of his nose, and everyone's like, woo! And Toto kind of goes over and pulls the curtain back, and there's a guy in a Brooks Brothers suit, right, with a nice trimmed beard, and he's like pulling, switches and turning knobs, and he speaks into his mic, don't look at the man behind the curtain, right? And that's where we're at. And he wrote that in the 20s, like, with the Depression, 29, right? Anyway, so this has happened before. Tartarian, we had a culture here called Tartaria, and not like long ago. I mean, it kind of semi-died in the 1870s. Right, but it was, part of the Gilded Age, right? It was part of the Teapot Dome scandal. It was part of why we had, it was like the Whiskey Rebellion. About 6 times that the Union Wars. It's not like this is something new, right? And it's all around the world, the same thing. So the world is, and there is no country that is is going to take over, right? There's. Like when we took over, it was like the kiss of death for us, right? We left our sweet spot, right? And a lot of people got really rich and really powerful, but the country went down the chutes. Sorry to tell you that. Now, I lived in that sweet spot. I was born in 50, and so I grew up as a kid in the 50s, a teenager in the 60s, a young adult in the 70s. A mature young adult in the 90s. I was in my 30, well, let's see, 88, I was 38, right? So in the 90s, I was in my 40s, right? That's still a young punk, really. And all those years, I'm living in New York, and New York was totally frigging bankrupt. They couldn't even collect the garbage, or they went from 30,000 cops to 5,000 cops. You talk about, defund the police. Good luck with that. I lived in a neighborhood where there was 5 murders every week for 20 years. Now, most of those people needed to be murdered, and that's what happened. People got pissed off with the jerk off, and they would, like, gangs would get them, take them up to the roof, and throw them off the roof. Right now, I lived there. Everyone knew me. I was a nice guy. I helped people. I fixed their light switches. I had nothing. Everyone knew I had nothing. If I had anything, I'd give it to you, right? I mean, I remember in the early 70s, I lived on 2nd Avenue. I mean, right on 2nd Avenue, just down the street from the Fillmore East where I worked. One of the places I worked anyway. And see, I didn't have one place. There were so many abandoned buildings. I had all kinds of great places to live in. In the industrial areas that I was fixing, like the garment district, I fixed a lot of machines that were like so old. I was taught how to do these things by this guy who was in his 90s when I was his apprentice. I was the magician's apprentice. So he taught me all about the ancient machines so I could fix them. No one could fix them, right? And so that was pretty lucrative for me. These guys who had factories that made buttons and, all kinds of things for the fashion industry. And they didn't want to buy a new machine because A, it cost a lot of money, and B, it didn't make something as well as that old machine did. So I learned how to fix, even if I had to, that's where I learned how to, I needed a gear or something and I couldn't find it anywhere. I would make it. I would go to Zelf's. Zelf had a a shop, that had, Bridgeport milling machines and every kind of fabricating tool you could imagine. And that's where I learned how to do all this. And didn't go to college to do it. I did it right there and then. Now, I'm a lazy slug now. I should be being better at knowing how my digital world is. But no, I was in the middle of that digital world. I was, living, one of my 7 wives was, the smartest human being on earth. And she was inventing the digital world. Her famous algorithm is the thing that gave us AI. Now, I could have been a billionaire because I was right by her side. Had real inside information, but no, my concern was her welfare, not mine. Right? I've had many women in my life who were amazing, great women, and I could have taken advantage of them just the way our culture is, but I didn't because my concern was for their well-being, not mine. My well-being is I'm always taken care of by source, and as long as I do, ride along, let source drive the car of my life, I get out of the way, everything goes fine. Like I guess it was Thursday or Friday, I forget which day it was, but anyway, it's Walmart's. And basically, I went in there and I'm hobbling in, and there is no electric go-kart shopping thing, right? So I sit down on a little bench they have next, and this woman's sitting there and she's not looking too happy. And I know that sooner rather than later, a whatchamacallit, electric go-kart shopping thing will show up, right? So instead of and like hobbling around and cursing, and I just sat there, and this lady sat down, and we started talking, and no one's ever been, no one's talked to. Her husband she can't walk around, so she's sitting there. There was no electric go-kart for her, so she's sitting like I am, right? And so he's doing the shopping. So I'm talking to her and talking to her and talking to her, and just listening to her mostly, right? Telling her a cute little story here and there, but mostly listening to her, right? And my stories are ancillary to what her problem is, right? And then I read her palm, and my reading of the palms is just a shtick. It's like no hokey mystic anything. Human beings are like Mr. Potato Head. There are only so many patterns. What I'm very good is, that I constantly say, I'm very observant. I'm hyper observant. I'm really good at seeing how you're feeling, what you're doing, what your tells are, how you cross your legs, what part of your body you're pulling, all of those kind of things. And they're very observable. So I tell them, oh, you're this, you're that. And I can see them do just like me. I'm doing, these are all tells, right? So anyway, I listen to her and I kind of am informed by her body language. And I get her to a point where she's like almost crying. I said, no, you're not crazy, and you're not, it's not physical. It's not, psychological. What it is, you got a habit. You just have to identify that habit and put something more positive in its place, right? And she's listening, and I tell her what her habit is. And I said, so when you feel this coming on and you're losing grip and you're getting scared, this is what you do. God, please help me. I have no idea what's going on in my life. You take the wheel, drive the car. I'll get out of the way. And I had her repeat it 3 or 4 times, and she couldn't even repeat it. I would say it. I said, now repeat that. She couldn't even do that. She was so discombobulated. Then I said it again, and she got a little half of it right? And then I said it a 3rd time, and she forgot it. And then I said, okay, now I'm going to say it for the 4th time, and all you have to do is say it in your own way. You don't have to repeat what I said. It's not a magic thing. You just have to feel it, right? So I said, now, be quiet. Take a nice big breath in, and take a breath out. Take a breath in. Take a breath out. Okay, now I said it to her, and then she repeated it in her own words. And she started to cry because she let go of the anxiety and fear by saying that. She just started weeping and weeping and weeping. And then I said, breathe, breathe in. And then she lit up like the sun. She goes, it's gone. I said, see? I said, if you do that every time you feel that anxiety, you feel that fear, you do that every time, within 2 weeks, I said, you probably feel this stressed out at least 10, 15 times a day. If you do it every time, if you do that for 2 weeks, you will never be anxious. You will never be upset. And you'll allow God to come into your heart and drive the car. And she goes, and then she said, oh, if I could, I would. She was so big, she couldn't really get herself to be able to hug me. And then her husband showed up, and he was like, what's going on, right? And it's obvious, whatever their relationship is, was a little bit, stressed. They were like, you know, not bringing out the best in each other. Anyway, so she got up and she walked over to him and gave him a big hug and kiss and told him how much she loved him. And he looked at me. He goes, what'd you do? I said, no, buddy, it's now from this point on what you do. You respond in a positive way to what she just said. Everything's going to work out fine. So he turned around and gave her a big hug and, I love you too, honey. Right? And they both started crying, hugging each other right there in Walmart's in the front door, right? And just as that happened, this woman came in and I said, are you done with that cart? And she says, yes, I'm done. And she kind of drove over to me. I got in and drove away, leaving that other couple crying and hugging. I love you, honey. Right? So I go around and I get my stuff that I need, and I go out and I can put things in the cart, but my shoulders got to have so much arthritis. It's hard for me to lift my arm like above. I can't see where the elbow is. I can't get that above that, right? So I don't, I can't take the thing out of the thing and scan it myself, right? So I get online where they got 20 spaces where they'd have normally a checkout person, but there's only one, right? So I'm there, and I'm behind this woman who has a gigantic shopping cart full of stuff, and the whole conveyor belt is full of stuff, and beep, 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 right, doing that. And I'm behind her, and there's a person comes and gets behind me, and then, beep, 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 and then someone gets behind them, and beep, 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 and then someone gets behind them. So there's now about 4 of us in line, and it's still beep, beep. This lady's getting a lot of stuff. So she gets through it, and the checkout lady said, that'll be $320, right? And so she sticks in her card and declined. And then, it's a debit card, so they run how much money is in it. And so she can buy $250 worth of stuff, right? And so she has to decide what things she doesn't want. She's like, and now it's taken even longer to do that. And after by the first one, everyone behind me is, what is it? I'm in a hurry. And there was, get some more people here. And no, of course, Walmart's not going to have any more than one human cashier. And this lady's older than me, right? And she's still working at Walmart's. Anyway, so you can see the stress in the lady behind the cash register, and the other lady who is there, she's really kind of stressed out too, and she's black, and the people behind me are all white, and they're, and anyway, so I go, wait a minute. By the fourth thing, because the lady's like, I go, excuse me, ma'am, is this food for a month? And she goes, no, it's this week. I said, what? You have to do this every week? She goes, yes. I said, so you spend something like $1,500 to $2,000 just on food every month? And she goes, yes. I used to just spend $300, but everything has gotten so expensive. And everyone behind me is, right? And I go, so I say to the cashier lady, I said, so how much money is she done to have? She said, she needs $70. So I turned, there's 4 people there. And so I said, hey, why don't we all, I got $20. Why don't we all get $20 out of our pocket and give it to the cashier, and then the lady can go, because it's all bagged up. It's all on her thing, and she's having to go through everything. Otherwise, we're going to be here for a week. Come on. Let's do this. It's a Christian thing to do. Why would I do that? Yeah, she's, one person, but that's a black person. And I was like, what? So I go, really? Really? So I said, let me. So I have this debit card that I never use because it's from a account that I have. It's like 30 years old, but I've kept it for 30 years, right? And when I got it, I did have money. So I did a lot of things with that bank. I ran my business with it. So I have a, pretty good credit rating with that bank. And so I have this thing that my banker way back then said, when you open this, if you get a burial insurance policy, and it takes $2 a month and puts it in there, once it gets to a certain point, it will be a reserve. And if you get a credit line, not a reserve, but like a loan for the credit line, that thing will pay off the VIC of your credit line, right? Anyway, so I had it in there, and then I moved out of that neck of the woods, and I still had that account, and it kept doing that to the point that that burial thing was making me money. It had paid my credit line off, and so it was a pretty big credit line, and so it just kept putting money into that made interest. I put it back into my checking account. And so when I came back into the general neighborhood and realized I hadn't, I met this person who was at the bank, and, we haven't seen you forever. Where you been? I said, not here. And she goes, well, come in. I said, is Bubba still there? And he was the guy who was the manager who basically sold me property. I mean, he was a great guy. So he was like what a bank manager should be. So he was always, hey, you got $10,000, we can give you a CD that will, if you can keep it in here for 5 years, you'll make $50,000. I did stuff like that. That's when I had money, right? I don't have, like 2 cents to my name. Anyway, so that's just, I have that debit card, and it's not a credit card, but it's a debit card. Anyway, so I have no idea how much money was in that account. I haven't used it ever, right? So I said, let's go to Las Vegas. Let's see. So I said, so I stuck that thing in there, and that $70 that lady owned. Then the machine said, "Do you want cash back?" I said, in for a penny, out for a pound. So I hit that button, and I said, "Give me $40." Then I hit the thing, and it went, and it said accepted. So it paid the $70 for that lady, and when they, gave me the $40, I handed her $40. And I said, so what do you do? She goes, I'm a nurse. And I work 2 shifts a day. I work 15 hours a day. She has 5 kids. Her church, I said, doesn't your church help you? No. When my husband died, they said, okay, you can leave the church now. We don't want you. Anyway, so, and that's, I won't go any further than that. But anyway, I did that, and the woman she was in such, stress. She basically was bawling, right? And the cashier lady, I would have gotten up, but I couldn't get out of my carriage because of space. Anyway, that nurse lady, she bent over and hugged me, and the cashier lady came around and hugged. The 3 of us were behind. Both those ladies were crying, and I was a little teary myself. And so, but I was happy. This was like, yeah, okay. Talked to that woman front and got her husband and her, and then, this happened, and this was, great, right? And so, and the rest of the people, did any of them feel happy? No. Hurry up, get on. I've got to have all day. anyway, what the cashier lady does, so I didn't have a lot of stuff. I had maybe 6 items, and she puts them, she's there, so they put, because I couldn't lift the stuff up, so they put them on the conveyor belt. And the old lady, the cashier lady, basically puts the sign behind my stuff saying, "This line is closed." She turned the light off, and everyone, "What you gonna do?" And they're all screaming and jumping up and down back there. And she like click click click, and does it. And she goes, "Do you have any money?" I said, "Let's see. We'll try it again." And I used my other card that I knew had a few dollars in. And so, but that what had cost me back in May $40 cost me $91 this time. So that was the Donny tariff war tax, right? So anyway, so as I was leaving, because all the Walmart people have little things in their ear, and they're like on a common link. So as I was going, all the other people in their blue vests were like looking at me like I was John the Baptist. And the lady comes out of this door and comes over to me. She goes, "Sir, I watched it on TV. I listened to Marjorie's little microphone, and what happened, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, why did you do it?" I said, "Why? That's the thing to do. We're neighbors. We're supposed to help each other." And she almost started to cry. She goes, "God bless you." And I gave her a little Bible book, and she was like, and then I went out, and the security guy, he was like, "Hey, I heard that. Are you Santa Claus?" And I said, "No, I'm his brother, Bob. I take care of the naughty and nice list." And then I went out, and then basically I had this thing in front of me, and so I ran into the column, and this kid runs over with a Walmart. "Are you okay, sir? Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "My boss told me to watch out for you. Do you need any help?" I said, "Yeah, I need help. You can see that I need help. I just ran into this post here. I didn't even see it." She goes, "Well, I can't drive this for you, but I'll just stay on your side just to make sure you don't run into anything." And so we go across, where it's got all the lines. It says, "Stop for the pedestrian." You can see people in big trucks. And he's like putting out his hand, and he walks me over to the car, and he puts all of my stuff in the car. "Thank you, buddy." And he's going to take the wagon back for me. Because most of the people just leave them in parking lot. I know I do, because I can't walk back. So anyway, so I got this, sir. So I read his palms and told him, and so I listened to his whole story. He's an interesting kid. He's, family, but he's not ultra damaged over it. And he's Irish, and he's Celtic, and he's got like real Irish name, first Irish name, and second. I said, I said, so I read his poem. I said, "So you're really pretty good artist. You like poetry, don't you?" He goes, "Yeah, I love reading, and I write poems, but I love painting." I said, "You know what you need to do, kid? So what generation?" He said, "I'm second generation. My grandfather came over, right? So you're actually an Irish citizen, How good are you on the computer?" He says, "Really good." He goes, I said, "Do you have a passport?" He goes, "Oh, yes. I went to Ireland once with my mother, right, when her father died, right?" So he has a passport. He has a birth certificate. I said, "This is what you do. You go online. You put into the Irish thing that you want a visa because you want to move back to Ireland and you want to go to school and you want to be a doctor, but you also want to be a poet, right?" So you put that in there, and they will give you a visa, and they will get you over to Ireland. And if you can step up to what it takes to do all of that, they'll put you through school. And and Ireland now is one of the best countries economically, socially, etc. And he goes, "Yeah, I loved it when I visited. So why stick around in this stinky hole? Do you have a girlfriend? No. Go get the heck out of here." And he says, "I'm going to do that." "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." And I gave him a Bible book too. And now these Bible books, do I have any nearby? They're not your normal Bible books. And oh yeah, here's one. Can I get it? Yes, I can. Like this. See, they're really thin. They fit in your pocket. And there are a whole bunch. This guy is a pretty good writer. And there's a number of other ones I have by. Oh, let's see this one. This is a very good one. This guy is old school. And that's who he is. So I got this rich guy gives us maybe 20 of these a month to give away, maybe even more, maybe 100. And I'll have these two and a few others I have. There's the New Testament, just the New Testament, not the whole Bible, just the New Testament. So it's kind of thin. And it's in pretty, so it fits in your pocket, but you can read it without glasses. So these are the books I carry around and I hand out to people when I see that they need them. And so that's my job these days, right? Because my Mr. Fix-It days are gone. I can barely walk. I can can't even see, I mean, I can see good enough to drive and get around, but if, I'm not really looking at that. I can, like that post I smashed into, in front of, that's so no one can drive a vehicle into the Walmarts, they have the big concrete posts in front of the doors, right? So I was trying to get between them, and there were so many of them, I got one. So anyway, so that's my normal day when I go out and about. Things like that happen all the time. Because every day and every way, I take the piece of the earth and I make it stronger within the spirit of the source, right? So that's my job, right? Not to get angry, not to get frustrated. Of course, there's tons of stuff that piss me off and frustrate me. But I say, okay, God, don't have an idea about this. You take the wheel, drive the car, right? So the rest of that day, just one good thing after another. I mean, I came out of Walmart's and I went over because a friend of mine, someone stole her little, those things, they're not electric, but they sweep up the dirt on your rug, right? So someone stole that from her, right? Really, she wanted me to do the carpet on her front, so I did, right? So I knocked on her door, and she said, and so I waited 5 minutes. Meaning I thought, she was indisposed, and I said, I'm just leaving this thing out here. But what she was she was in bed, and she was half asleep, so she slept the day away, and in the morning when she went to look for the thing outside, it was gone. Someone stole it. Meaning one of our neighbors in Leisure Village stole it, right? So she's pissed off about that. So I said, God, I'm going to go to Goodwill and see if there's one there. And I went there, and there was her exact one, right? And I saw it in Walmart, so they wanted $90 for it, and the exact same one at Goodwill was $3. Right? So then at Goodwill, I found a really nice coat for the fall and a nice hoodie, and they each were $2, and they're my size. So, so for $7. I bought a hat too. So for $10, I got a nice hat, 2 coats, and a sweeper for my neighbor, right? And then, I was coming out of there, and there's the traffic flow through that mall and the ancillary roads really suck. So if you know it, you can go kind of around the back of this big box store and come out right where the thing is, and it puts you right there where the light is, and you can go. So, but everyone who's down the road, they have to stop at a stop sign and wait till they can go, right? But if you come all the way around the other way, if there's a space, you can just jump in there. So that's exactly what I did. So I got in that space, and the light changes, and I move forward, and I see this guy coming, just Mad Max, through the things. And because he had been on that big, long line, and he gets next to me, and he leans on the horn, and he just starts, being, profanity. And I just kind of look at him, and I kind of wave, like, and he's got a diesel. He guns it, and the black smoke covers the whole road. But I've already turned where I was going to turn, and I went into this place that had I had some things printed up, and I had paid for half of it, and so I went in there, and I owed him another $30. So I only had $10 cash. So I said, "Here's $10," and he goes, "Well, here's the stuff. You pay me when you can." Right? So I said, "Oh, that's nice of you." So I went on, and then I came back to Leisure Village, and usually, because it's downtown, every parking spot is always just totally, you can't find it. You have to go around and around and around. I came around, drove there, right in front of Leisure Village. Was a nice, where I didn't even have to like do a K turn to get in there. Just kind of zinked right in, got out. And as I was walking into Leisure Village, this one person who's out there, I had this stuff, and I couldn't. Again, I had to go and get a buggy to take the stuff in, the groceries, water, stuff like that. And I was having a hard time with this guy on a bicycle. No, in a car. He was in the car. He basically, stops and goes, "Sir, do you need a hand?" And he like kept his car going in the street. I mean, someone could get by him on the other lane, but he helped me to put the groceries in the cart, and then he pushed it. I mean, I was pushing it, but he was like kind of pulling it into the building and to the elevator, hit the button. And I said, "How about help me up in my..." He goes, "No, I let the car running out in the street." I said, "Oh, yeah. So that was my day the other day, right? Now, today, I spent the whole day up here just kind of looking at stuff and talking to this guy on the phone for 4 hours. And he needed to hear stories and talk about this, that, and the other thing. He needed a conversation. And I kind of gave him a pep talk because he's really smart. He's got a lot on the ball, but he lets the world kind of roll over him. So, and you don't have to fight it. You just have to get out of the way. And, and get out of your own way is really what you need to do. So anyone got anything to say? Oh, look, you guys have been talking the whole time. Let's see. What are you saying here? Let's see. Howdy, Sensie Owl Bob. Howdy. Jenny Pooh says hi to you. And good. I haven't heard from you in a long time, Jay. Buy Carvel beverage and put it in the regular paper bag cup. Good fiber, good for you. You have an AI filter. I'm sure I'm due, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but YouTube and AI have been doing shorts of my long shows. And I have to admit, they take, like right now, it's an hour and 3 minutes, and they take that and do 2 or 3 minute shorts, and they actually do a pretty good job. I don't ask it to do it, but it does it. Having this new phone has been interesting that, like when it transferred phone numbers from my passive-aggressive phone into this one, what was truly amazing, I don't know how it did it, but it took phone numbers that I thought I lost and put them in there. Like my nieces, my cousins, some of my 128 godchildren, a number of people that I thought I lost, and there they were. I called them all up over the last couple of weeks, and how'd you get my phone number? I said, God did it, So, I mean, and the other thing I have to tell you about AI kids, it is so much more sophisticated than you can even imagine. It's not even close. So, although, Independence Day, all that kind of shit, these are just films they put out there. I had a comedy, but I deleted it. You had a comment. Okay. Well, whatever. I know you did it in good. Is John dead? I don't think John is dead. I just think John is probably in his own mind on another planet. John definitely. Poor John. I mean, he had a lot of. He he had a lot of talent, a lot of class, a lot of everything, good-natured, but he let the worst sides of himself get a hold of himself, right? His parents are quite well off. He's never going to have to worry about, never did. They pay all his bills. They've always paid all his bills. He never worked a fucking day in his life. But, oh, I work 20 hours a day on the school, blah, blah, blah. Well, he did. He kind of did a nice job on the school, meaning I never, the building was concrete, right? Now, George and his son, who had egos the size of Mount Rushmore, they built these buildings and had no real. They were like art pieces rather than knowing how to build a building. Right? This school had all of these beautiful patios around it, but when they poured, and everything's made out of poured concrete, and so when they poured the concrete, they basically, instead of sloping it so the water would go down it and go off the edge into the forest, they had it so all the water kind of drooled back and went into the walls and rotted out the walls. Good design, right? So anyway, and they never fixed it. Me, I did I like put rugs with 2x4s on it so most of the water would just roll off onto the bed. Anyway, but John actually kind of fixed all that stuff, right? And there were a lot of plumbing wise and electric wise and all that other wise, because George and his son wired the place with phone wire. Now George was kind of smart that he lit everything up with fluorescents and they don't take any real current. But the outlets, he basically had, people just kind of, that circuit would be there for those fluorescent lights. They would hook a outlet on it and, plug in a toaster oven. Yeah, it worked, but it kind of fried every wire. Anyway, but they were inside the concrete walls, in the concrete, so they didn't burn the place down. I mean, they did have a couple little electric fires. But anyway, bottom line is the place needed good working on, which I just bought it because Inga needed the money and she wanted to get rid. The thing was a mule stain around her neck. So I got it, and it was good, right? So, and it was a very spiritual place, and I had my mystery school there for almost 10 years. It was great. But then I died, and I mean, it was really more or less my warehouse, because when I got rid of all my other properties all over the place, I kind of moved everything into that, right? Just like, I kind of thinned it down, but still had a lot of stuff to move when I went to the deep green. So anyway, and genetically, I'm kind of a pack rat, but I'm good at letting things go, right? Because my father's thrown most of the stuff that I ever cared about away. So I had to let that go so I could let other things go. And these are all lessons. You learn from them, it's a positive thing. If you don't and hold on to the angst about it, then you are basically, stuck in a box before they even put you in the ground. And that's where most people are. Their lives are just, walking misery, Men are in the dynamic of, what is that thing about quiet desperation? That's where everybody is. Instead of being really happy about being alive. I'm happy to be alive because, like, whether it was Thursday or Friday, I'm not quite sure, but having a day like that, boy, that was like. And what's truly amazing, I try to call up my sisters and tell them that story. I'm too busy. Oh, someone's calling in, meaning unless it's someone I know who it is and it's like important, or I think I should talk to that person because I'm sensing that there's something wrong with them. Like my friend who called me up and we spoke for 4 hours. I picked it up because I've been trying to talk to him because I knew he was having a hard time and he wouldn't answer the phone. And so he finally did call when he had some time, and he just wanted to unload. He talked to me for 4 hours, right? So anyway, but my sister, I was telling her this story, and she wasn't even listening to it. And so when someone called up, I had to let you go, and I said, who is it? Oh, it's this lady who it's it's really nothing, but I got to talk to her. I said, is there anything important? Is she sick? Is she gonna die? Is she in any trouble? Oh no, but when's the last time you talked to her? Oh, this morning. I said, okay, I'll see you later. Bye. And my sister didn't want to hear the good news. That's the bottom line. And a lot of people don't want to hear the good news, right? Or hear the understanding of what's going on, that we could do something about it. And we could. I've seen it. I've been part of it. I've seen change really happen, big time. So my friend who I talked for 4 hours, I mean, he is a really, brilliant guy, and he's an archivalist. And when I was an itinerant scholar, I dealt a lot with archivalists and librarians, right? And so they are a whole different. You ever watch the TV show, The Librarian? You should go watch that. So I knew a lot of librarians that are like those people in that TV show, right? Meaning librarians are not just like your neighborhood library. Those people can be a stick in the mud. But the ones who are like in, special research libraries, they're interesting folk. So I spent a good 15 years working with people like that. And I would be the guy. I wasn't like there to take their job. I wasn't there part of their administration or their anything. I was there being paid for by another entity, like somebody like Brookings or the Rockefeller Foundation or the CFR, the Trial Commission, or a whole bunch of other entities you have no idea of. I would work for them because they're doing a project in that university or in that institution, and they needed a person who wasn't of those institutions' ilk, who could see what they were doing with the project that was in their hands, because they had the resources of the literature or the ancient texts in their properties, right? So I did that for 15 years. And so I got to know a lot of archivalists and a lot of librarians, right? I know the good ones from the bad ones. And so, and work on some really interesting projects, like, Looking Glass, right? Looking Glass was an interesting project. They found artifacts. Like, why did we have the war in 91 to go into Iraq, right? Because back in the 80s, we paid Saddam Hussein to attack Iran. And we gave Saddam Hussein, poison gases to use on the Iranians. We gave the Iranians better aircraft than we gave to the Shah back in the day when we gave it to Shah. And we gave them tanks, and you name it, we gave it to them. And Iran and Iraq had a war for 5 years. And I think Iraq lost 1 million soldiers and people, and Iran lost half of that. And Iran just, never gave up. And Iraq had twice the military that Iran had. And anyway, and that's after that war, Iran said, okay, we're not going to fight another one of those. We have to think of a better way, because in reality, we weren't just fighting Iraq, we were fighting America. So one of these days, America is going to come after us. So we are going to have to rethink this. And that's how they, asymmetrical warfare. And that's why they're kicking America's butt, because America's still fighting the World War II kind of war, right? What won us the war in Japan? We overproduced hardware. Japan came at us with 6 of their best aircraft carriers, and then conquered all of the Pacific with 6 aircraft. So what did we do? We built 50, twice as big. The Japanese aircraft carriers had about 30 airplanes. Ours had 100. They had zeros that were like a piece of art. And so when the zero went up against anything of their day, the zero won. I mean, it could climb faster. It had bigger guns, but it was made out of, like paper and balsa wood. And so it was very light. It had a pretty big engine, but not a gigantic engine. It had like maybe a 300 horse engine. And it had big, it had machine guns. It didn't have 50 cals, but it had their largest caliber. And it could carry, 1,000 pounds worth of bombs. And they had some pretty interesting bombs. They had torpedoes, but they had these skip bombs that the airplane would dive real fast and then pull up. And just when it was like 100 yards from the aircraft, they'd let the bomb go, and it would skip along the water and hit the boat just below the waterline, bang, blow a big hole in it, and the boat would sink. And so the Japanese took out the English Navy that was in the Pacific they almost meant if the Japanese had gone after Australia instead of Hawaii, they would have won the war. Because we wouldn't have gotten in the war, and we would have made weapons for England to go against the Germans, but we wouldn't have gotten in the war. The English would have. And the other thing, if the Germans at Dunkirk, they could have captured 1 million English soldiers. They let them go because they were they said, well, we don't want to really piss England off because we want to diplomatically do what we did with the Russians, make a deal where we have okay, we're going to stop fighting. And then Germany could get really busy on building the weapons that they wanted to have the atomic bomb, they wanted a hydrogen bomb, they wanted flying saucers, right? They had an eye on other technologies, right? And they had them. They just didn't have the industry to manufacture that stuff, right? So if they could stop England fighting them, and they had all of Europe, and Italy had, all of that part of neck of the woods, and they had a treaty with Russia that Russia would have never attacked Germany, because they already knew that was, as long as no one's going to attack them, and they got a lot of real estate out of it. They got all of the, what became the Soviet Union. They got that from basically Adolf, right? And so they would have been happy with that, and they would have, just let it go, and they would have focused on getting their act together in Russia, right? So if Adolf had done that, but see, again, Adolf was placed there. He was another person who was just reading his script, because he did so many stupid things. I mean, his generals had, Dunkirk surrounded by 88s pointed down at those guys like shotguns. They could have obliterated those guys. And they had their submarines out there, and they could have sunk a lot of English Navy, but they didn't. Adolf said, no, let them get away. And the generals were kind of apoplectic. They couldn't. And so Adolf made a number of mistakes of that nature. And the other thing was, they could have had the atomic bomb by 1940. Heisenberg was, right, smarter than all the scientists that we had put together. And he said, we should do this. And because of Nazi propaganda, they said, that Einstein, that's Jewish physics, we don't want to do Jewish science. Really? Science is science. It's not Catholic science, or, just because those guys were Jewish, it's still physics, guys. And that they were like 10 years ahead of us. And because of that stupidness, we caught up, because we had resources that they didn't have, right? But they were going after heavy water, and we got enough people in there to get the skinny on what was going on. And so we blew their heavy water factory up. That was understanding, meaning they were going to skip the atomic bomb and go straight to the hydrogen bomb. So anyway, those are just little historical moments that you really don't. No one tells, but your sensei, your griot, will tell you those stories, and don't believe a word I say. Go look this stuff up, right? So come on, there's 3 of you there. How about a couple more thumbs up? Let's see. Has anyone said anything? Thank you. I believe in you guys too, right? 1940s. Yep. Question mark. Yep. Okay. Are you in North Carolina? Nope. I'm in Tennessee. And Tennessee it's like the fastest growing. All the Californians, the Floridians, the Texans, people from Charlotte, North Carolina, and New York and New Jersey are coming here because there are no taxes, right? And everyone can be bought off, right? So we have these big, beautiful TVA lakes. There's one called Watoga. Beautiful, beautiful lake. I mean, just beautiful. And I love living near it. And I live on the north side, northwest side. No, I guess it's the southeast side of that, right? Over near Butler. And but I don't live there, but I live in a place called Nowhere. And that's why I bought it. My banker, the same guy who did all this great banking for me. When you have a good banker, it can't be beat. And there's no such thing. Oh, that's not true. The people who are in the two banks, they love me, because I call them up from. So what's my checking balance? Because I don't do anything online. And they love talking to me because I listen to their woes and then I give them advice about it. So everyone in those banks, and when I do show up in person, I give them books to read. And so both the presidents of those two banks just love my ass. So anyway, so that's how I got that piece of property. I asked Bubba. I said, Bubba, I'm pretty flush. I'm about to get 50 grand. That a couple of years ago, you told me, I had 10 grand to stick in a CD, and in 3 years, I was going to get 50 grand. And I said, you got to have some paper that you want to get rid of, meaning mortgages. And he goes, oh, yeah, I got a bunch. So he goes, how's, like tomorrow? And I said, sure. So we went to lunch. We went to the nice, we got a couple of, there used to be a great Mexican, all they made was burritos. That was it. They just made burritos, really great burritos. So we got a couple of burritos. We got a 6-pack, and we headed out on the road, and we were looking at different properties. He took me to this one, and it was in between Trade and Pogieville, kind of. It's like in a triangle between Trade up here, Pogie over here, and Banner Elk over here. And Trade's right on the border of North Carolina and Tennessee. Banner Elk is in Tennessee, and Pogie Land depends on what part. So where I was in Pogie Land, I was right on the border of North Carolina and Tennessee, not too far away from Flag Pond. I used to have a place in Flag Pond. Beautiful, top of the mountain, just gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful. Anyway, so Bubba takes me to this place, and we get there, and it's beautiful, beautiful ride all over the place to get up there, and then we get on a logging road, and it's in, he's got a 4-wheel drive, a pickup truck, so it's relatively passable, but it's a logging road. It's not even a dirt road. It's a logging road. It had a couple of culverts in important places, so it wouldn't wash out. It had some stone on it, so it wasn't that muddy. But when we got down into the holler, it was like going into a bog. Anyway, we get there, and he goes, well, this is it. I said, can't we get out and look at it? He goes, yeah, but this place, we open the door, we're just going to get, taken away by mosquitoes. And so I opened the door, and he was right. It was a zillion. So boom, right? So I'm looking at the place, and so he goes, well, I'm going to drive up top of this hill, and then you can see the whole property. So it's like about 4 acres, and it was right in this holler of 3 mountains. So all around me were big, tall mountains, like maybe 200 feet above. And this was only flat property. Every other property was on a cliff, right? Nowhere to build a house. But this had 3 acres, but it was a bog. It was mud and ick and big old growth trees, big oaks, big maples, big trees, right? Been there forever. So it had a big canopy, so no sunlight got in there. Just what mosquitoes love. Just enough sun, but not too much. Nice and cool. Water. There were 3 springs right there. So I look at it, and I go, so how much do they want for this? And he goes, $1,500. I said, what? This is beautiful. This is gorgeous. And there was like the electricity was right there. There was a spring, 3 springs, so there's plenty of water, and the road was there. I mean, I didn't have to this thing was like a mile and a half off the blacktop. So if that was just property inside of a forest, I'd have to build a road. The road's right there. I mean, there were actually 2 of them: the Death Road and the Logging Road. So anyway, the Death Road was so steep, it was a logging road too, but it would just wash right out. So, chunks of it were gone, right? If you went up it, there's no way to back out, no way to turn around. That's why I called it the death road. But it was right between the two, right? So anyway, it was like ridiculously cheap. And he goes, you got enough money in the bank, no problem. He goes, but we're going to get you a mortgage. I said, well, yeah, it's good for your credit rating, right? And, I'll get you a 5-year mortgage and you pay it off. It's $1,500. You can pay it off tomorrow, but pay it off in 12 months and you will get $5,000. I said, sounds good to me. So, he would do stuff like that for me. He would figure out the best thing in his bank he could offer me that I could make money on if I was ready to, put cash into it. And I only have 25 cents. I want to buy. So anyway, so Bubba was probably one of the best bankers. I've had some pretty good bankers. I've been very lucky with bankers. So anyway, and they're honest as the day is long, but they know what they're talking about. They're like lawyers too, so they know everything about it. And so anyway, so that's how I got to Deep Green. And what I did was first thing I did was look at it. I camped on it a few times, but mostly in the late fall because the mosquitoes weren't as bad as when it was like really, because it was a rainforest, it would rain all the time. So that's why I call it the Deep Green. Anyway, so, a year went by because I had a place down in the Keys. I had a place in Stuart, Florida. I had 5 places in Virginia. And I had 7 places in Varna, and I had a few other houses in Roanoke. And so I had a lot of real estate because that was, I bought all that stuff between 86 when the savings loan collapsed and then in 91 when the dot-com bubble popped. Those were all great times to buy stock and CDs and real estate, right? For nothing, right? And you get tax write-off. When you have a good, aware banker, can't beat it, right? So anyway, I had a lot of assets, between 88 and 2014, right? And half of them were, I rented them out. They were earners, right? So I was doing pretty good, right? And that's why I really didn't have to work. I only worked at things I enjoyed doing that paid me a lot of money. And so between 2003 and 2014, that's when I worked in the corporate world. And I only had to work 11 weeks a year. And these guys loved my ass so much, I kept getting themselves out of a box they painted themselves into, that I only took common sense. And this is, I was in that was big time corporate world. These guys, 6-figure salaries, they had like 20-figure salaries. It was, and they were still overextended. That's when I knew our economy was toast. The guys who are running it are that much in debt. Anyway, and so that's where we are right now. We are like, it is so over, right? Like I said, go, you know what to do? Go to my Dreamy Dreamland with Sensie Owl Bob and go look at the shit that I watch on YouTube. And it's all like Scott Ritter and, very, the 2 Chinese professors and Jimmy Haifang and Chris Hedges and who else? Wendy Webb, I think. She's quite cool. There are a few other people. Just go on there. They're all there. And especially when you hit history, it really kind of shows everything I've ever watched on my channel. So there's a lot of stuff there. Some really good people. Cliff Hyde and, dark journalist Daniel and who else? A bunch of other things. Go take a look. And I have a ton of like stuff about the Essenes and the Gnostic folk and, the Bible by Jesus Christ, the Bible by, Mary Magdalene and Thomas and Timothy and John, the guy who wrote the End of Times book. You should read what he wrote about what was going on, right? See, because all those people kind of wrote it, from Jesus's death for 100 or so, 200 years before, things at Constantinople and all the other people started getting involved and just, like King James, has 66 books. The Bible by the Essenes is like 80, right? The Bible of the African guys, Ethiopian Bible, that's like almost 80 books. So what happened to those 20 books, right? Well, those are the ones that were full of people who know what was going on, like Mary Magdalene. You go read her stuff, right? And if you read, there's another person. It's a guy named Seth, right? He's a person. There's a woman named, what's her name? I forget her name, but she was in New York in the 60s, and she just, like my second wife, after we'd go to sleep and it'd be intimate, and she would, like guys normally kind of conk out as soon as she would, then she'd kind of go into state and voices would come out of her. First, they were talking in ancient languages, and I recorded them and brought them to a friend of mine at Columbia who's big on ancient languages. I said, "What is this?" He goes, "Well, it kind of sounds like Aramaic, but no one really knows how to speak Aramaic, but it kind of sounds like it." Anyway, so he was really interested. So he did, I gave him the tapes, and and he kind of started to figure out what it was and get a rough kind of understanding of what was being said. And so every time that voice would show up, I said, "Listen, you got to learn. I'm going to have to teach you how to speak English because, I can't understand Aramaic. But I do have a friend who kind of does, and so he says that you said, la, 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 is that right? Say yes or no, And so after about 5 months of that, that voice spoke English with a sounded like Cary Grant, like an English, movie star accent. It was, or Michael Caine. It was like very... Anyway, I said, "Are you English?" And he, "What's English?" So... Anyway, so that went on for about 4 years, which was kind of interesting. And but anyway, so this is what having a life is about, right? And that's why I do this show as a stream of consciousness. If I wrote a script about it, it wouldn't ring true, and it wouldn't be a story. And that's all this is. I am your griot, here to tell you a story. Don't believe a word I say. You go look it up, If you do that, you're going to have some insight. And if you have insight, you can understand what's going on in your life. And you can, let go of the control of, the master, You can cut those strings, right? And you'll realize, especially if you read, the Gnostic works, that what you've been told in Catholicism, Christianity, et cetera, is a bunka hokum, right? Same with the Old Testament. The Jewish stuff is the same thing. I mean, the thing about, Goebbels, the Nazi propagandist, he said, and he took a lot of the stuff that Freud was working on and basically took that understanding of psychology and basically made a vehicle that the guy's name, like Bernal or Bernays, basically turned into advertising, modern advertising. But it's propaganda. And Goebbels said, the way you have propaganda that works is you tell 60% truth and then 20% that is bent truth, and then 10% that's even more bent truth based on myth and things that people have heard and over their years since they were a kid, and then 10% of straight up lies that are repeated over and over and over within the construct of all of that other stuff. And that's perfect propaganda. And that's what Donald Trump does, right? That's why he lies so much, because that's that 10% of straight up bull-faced lies that basically, people kind of know it's lies, but they hear it repeated over and over and over again, that they start thinking, they mix it up with the truth stuff that they hear, right? So that's perfect propaganda. So that's what we've been getting pretty much since World War I, because it was kind of invented first by Freud, then by Bernays, then by this thing called the Tavistock Institute that I used to work through another entity that they had called the Bureau of Behavioral Investigation. Sounds cool, right? It was like the X-Files. The Bureau, an organization, like something that you put your socks into, Bureau of Behavior, what is a behavior? But anything that's going on, right? Institute, it gives it some level of authority, And that was a great thing. It's like, and when people say, "Where are you from?" "I'm from the Bureau." "The Bureau?" And then they think it was like the FBI or something. But Bureau of what? If I wanted to be a cheeky monkey, Bureau of the socks, But if I was pretending to be authoritative, I'd say, "I am from the Bureau of Behavioral Investigation." And that was enough to get me in the door anywhere. Right? So anyway, it's like that TV show where these guys run around and they're librarians, right? And so when they're in a really where they shouldn't be, like, the CIA sent their home thing underground with the aliens. "Who are you?" "We're the librarians." "Oh, okay, then come on in, That's how it works, Just have fun with it. That's what it's all about. The worst they could do is kill you. What happens? Bing, Bob's your uncle. You're making a deal to be. Do you ever see that movie where Loki is working for the time police? That's a pretty good show. I get that on my stream. Not the whole show, but just little bits of it. And that's kind of been my life, like that guy. But when I'm dead, I've died 7 times. I've had that kind of Loki experience, like, bing, and someplace, what the heck is this? Right? So when you die, they give you an opportunity to pick what you want to be. And they give you all this kind of karmic stuff that if you feel guilty, okay, I'll be a meth head, and go to jail for the rest of my life. Okay, you choose that. You got to choose whatever you got to choose. So I kind of choose this kind of cheeky monkey fun house. And that's, there's nothing I can complain about. When I tell people, "Oh yeah, I died 7 times. Oh yeah, a nun murdered me in 1st grade. Yeah, I was, not molested, but every time I deal with a doctor, unless I really go through them very, this way, they kill me. I mean, I've been given the wrong drugs. 8 different times. That is the medical model, guys. You should, your Sensie Owl Bob is telling you, watch out for those guys, And the shit that Robert Kennedy, the guy who's head of the FDA, right? That guy, his younger brother, Joseph Kennedy, was my roommate in prep school, right? And so when the family, Senator Robert Kennedy and Ethel, his wife, and the 10 kids showed up, I was roommate. So Mom said, "Oh, Al, would you like to come to dinner with us?" "Sure, why not? Better than staying in the hellhole of our prep school." Sure. So I went out with them, and they were all sociopaths, except for Mom. Mom and the daughter that was, was autistic. And they didn't know what autism, she was just quiet. But I kind of was talking, like smiling at her, and she smiled at me. We kind of communicated. And Ethel saw that, and she goes, "You're very empathetic, aren't you?" I said, and she goes, "And you're pretty observant." I said, "So are you, Mrs. Kennedy, So she goes, "I really, really appreciate you being my son's roommate, because hopefully some of the things that you are might rub off on him." Didn't really take. I used to read all the time, and I read into the night. I'm an owl, right? Right. So he would want to have me go to sleep so he could jack off, right? So why are you reading a book? You don't have to read it. I said, no, book good. He goes, "I never read. I said, what? He said, I'm a Kennedy. I don't have to read. I said, really? Yeah, good luck with that. So anyway, I got to know that family. And Robert Kennedy, he was a stable genius, just like, not just like, but he had a lot of the character that Donald Trump has. But he was a smart guy. And he understood the systems. He understood why his brother got assassinated. He understood everything. And he was going to get those motherfuckers. But, revenge is something served sweet. So he thought he was not, he was going to win. There is no winning, right? Anyway, so that's why he got whacked, because it was okay. They weren't going to whack him, but if he didn't run for president, they wouldn't have whacked him. He'd still probably be here, right? But Robert Jr., the boy who's part FDA, he was already on meth when I met him when I was like sophomore in high school, right? And he was kind of, he really didn't seem to care about anybody or anything, right? Except his own little whatever he wanted to do. And pretty much all those kids were that way. The girls weren't as bad as the other two boys, but he got them to do drugs, and half those kids died of overdoses, and a lot of his cousins died of overdoses, and no one seems to really talk about that. Just like Teddy, drowned poor Mary Jo, right? I mean, that whole family was, Dad was a pretty nasty gangster, right? Now, you talk to any Bostoner about this, oh man, if you talk like the Rambo, they would barbecue on a spit, right? But every politician's that way. And I asked, and Mr. Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, I asked him a couple of questions, but one of the questions I kind of like stuck him in the shorts. I said, so do you support the imperial motif of the economics of crony capitalism? And, I'm a sophomore in high school. He said, what? I said, well, are you all in the oligarchy? He said, what? I said, like your dad. He's part of the oligarchy. He said, what? I mean, he just kept saying, what? How can a 14-year-old ask me these questions in my limousine? And then, I shut up, and I already had a nice little conversation with Mrs. Kennedy, Ethel. I was sitting right next to her. Her daughter was on the other side of her, and I was like looking at the daughter like that. And not like, hey, baby, but like, you're a nice spirit. You're a good spirit. But the other ones were all in competition for their father's attention. And anyway, Ethel, when I said that to Robert, and then I shut up, and Robert got back on his wireless Motorola phone, talking as an important man. He had to talk on that phone all the time. Anyway, she said, that was quite interesting. Are you interested in politics? I said, not politics, no. I'm interested in organization, banking. And she goes, you want to be a millionaire? I said, no. But I like understanding what they're doing with the money in a global kind of manifestation, because a new world is coming. We're already in it. That's what all these wars are about. That's what First World War, Second World. And she says, it's a bit above me. And I said, where did you go to school? And she said, I went to Smith. And I said, well, that's a good school. What'd you study? And she said, well, medieval poetry. I said, that's good. Greek, that's good. Geometry. I said, my favorite. And she said, and geopolitics. I said, we both smiled and didn't say anything again. About that. But she was like, well, that was quite interesting. I said, has any of these kids said anything that to their dad? Oh, no. All they want is, Dad, can you give me $100? Can you buy me a new bike, a new horse, a new this, a new that? So, we stopped talking about it. Then we started talking about, so I said, tell me about Shakespeare. So we talked about Shakespeare pretty much the rest of the evening. And that was a pretty interesting, as a 14-year-old boy in a fancy French restaurant, in Worcester. And who knew that they had a fancy French restaurant in Worcester? And, so And I kind of asked her what it was like marrying into the Kennedy family, but I didn't ask that per se, but what's this like? And she said, it's interesting, you know. And she didn't talk about her emotions or her feelings or having all these kids and having them just kind of spoiled by what their family gene pool and money and power were. And so, and Grandpa was, pretty much the oligarch of the family. So anyway, but that's what, I only got, an hour and a half worth of experience of that. And Joe he didn't finish up. He was there that year and he left spring break came and we came back and had after spring break, we had maybe 6 weeks of school left and he didn't come back, which is fine by me because I got the room all to myself. It couldn't have been nicer, right? And so then the next year I was a junior and that was great. Because our class was the biggest, so we outnumbered everybody. And so our senior class, the guys who were above us, guys like Alex Orb, UB Hobart, Hobart cutting, every kind of restaurant machine is Hobart. Perry Dye, whose family owned Seagram's. Alex Ord's family owned U.S. Steel. My best buddy, his family owned the biggest paper consortium, not newspaper, but owning the trees and the lumber yards and the paper mills. I forgot what company that is. It's kind of Canadian firm, but it's a transnational entity. And who else was there? Shah of Iran's son, the guy who was going to come back after we decapitated, but he didn't last more than a few days in the news cycle. Those are guys I went to school with. What's his name? Austin Hurst, Hurst, communications, TVs, magazines, newspapers. Who else? Bunch of people. Oh, Eddie Merrill, Ricky Lynch, who kind of owned the stock market. And a couple of Europeans who were all related to the Rothschilds. That's how I got to know the Rothschild scene pretty well. So I was, dipped in all of that for 4 years, right? And we were up in a school where there was nobody around. We were like on top of a mountain. We were right at the foot of the presidentials where Mount Washington is. It like snowed 20 feet. After Halloween, it just started snowing until May, and that's when we were, end of May 1st was the last day of our school year. Everyone went back to their fancy stuff. When we graduated high school, there was 31 of us in our senior class. And Perry died. We didn't have like a senior prom. We had no girls. And the only girls out there were the townie girls who would just get on their back immediately because they wanted to get pregnant by one of these rich kids so they get a big check, right? So that was the dream of the girls downtown. And it was we were about 8 miles from downtown. Worcester, no, not Worcester, Winchington, Massachusetts, where the Winchington School of Boys was. And it used to be a country club, like how George Carlin talks about, it's like a country club and you're not part of it. That was us, So anyway, it had been known as the Winchington Toy Town Tavern because all the toys in the world were made in Winchington. It used to be a really rich town. The Depression kind of killed that one. So there was a train that kind of went right on the edge of our golf course. And it's very hilly. We were in this mountain range. I forgot. It's kind of the Appalachians, but they call it a different name. Anyway, so this railroad was cut right through this hill. So instead of having to go up this steep hill, they kind of so it was like more like this than this. So they kind of cut into it. And there was this place where it really cut into the hill. So you stood on the side of the hill and the train would be trying to make it up that hill. And so it'd be doing about 5 miles an hour. And whatever a boxcar was, the door was open. You could just step into it, like it was only going by you at 5 miles an hour. You could just step into it, right? Step into it, and you would ride it. It would go up, and then it would come down the hill, and there was a switch, and it would 99.9% of all the time, the train would go into this little train yard, where they kind of would split those boxcars up and send some this way and some that way and this and that, right? Not often was the whole train gonna go somewhere, right? Because it was a pretty long train when it came through our school, right? Until it went down the hill and went into this train yard that was behind the town, because that used to be a big industry place that got a lot of stuff coming in, a lot of stuff coming out. So anyway, we would take that ride, and the train would mostly, and if you got on in the middle of the train, but pretty much you had to get on whatever boxcar where the door was wide open. So, but if you got on in the middle, the train would come up and go into that yard. And in the middle of the yard, there was a place where, the siding was at the same height as the boxcar. So you could just walk right from the boxcar, go down 3 or 4 steps, and then walk, yards into town. And that was our train. That's kind of how we looked at it, right? We would take that pretty much when we went to town. So the girls would be waiting for it. You want to blow job? You want to fuck me? Come on. And it was like, this is talk about the, Epstein mentality, right? And these guys saw those girls as they were there, and those girls saw them as, that was a mutual take advantage of each other scene. And so it's quite me. Now, I wasn't into that, right? I was more into relationship. I had, from 3rd grade, I had women in my, young people my age, women, young girls, that we were buddies. We built forts together and went through the woods. And, I lived near an estate, and the guy had no family, but he had horses and dogs and all these people taking, and that was the closest thing he had to a family. Everybody died. I was the Anderson estate. And, I got to know him really well. He had an unbelievable library. He met me one day, summertime. We used to go swimming in his pool before my parents put a pool in. We used to go, and no one would notice or care. We would go, 3 or 4 of us. They would come up and hang with me. We go swimming in that pool. And so one day he came out. I was there all by myself, swimming around. He goes, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I live over." "Oh, yeah. Oh, yep. Okay. You hungry? You want to have lunch with me?" I said, sure. So he gave me a towel and a terry cloth bathrobe, and we ate lunch. His staff came out and brought us some nummies, and we talked, and he goes, "So you like to read books?" I said, "Oh, yeah, boy, do I ever." Took me in. He had the most freaking amazing library of everything, right? I said, "Have you read most of the stuff?" He goes, "Well, some of it. My wife was big into it, and my father was big into it. My grandpa, this is not really my home. This is my grandfather's home, but I'm the last of them, right? I own the corporation. I'm a really rich guy. I don't really do much. I never did. I wasn't really part of that. My other brother and my sister, they were really into the business, and they both died. And I was the last man standing. And, so I enjoyed this, and I have a place down in Florida, and I go to Europe and in the spring and the fall, and that's kind of my life, right? And anyway, so I saw you swimming with your friends. You guys can come here at any time you want. And I'm going to tell the guy who takes care of the horses, his daughter is a great equestrian, and she has no real friends. So she would probably love you guys to be her friend, right? So that was Emily. And the dog guy, his son was Desmond, and he was like on the spectrum, but he was a great guy, really tall. He was like Lurch, right? Really tall and really, really great with every kind of animal. And he was not stupid. He was smart. So, when the vet would come, he would be with the vet all the time, and he was reading all about anatomy and biology, and he was going to be a vet or a doctor, and he was like a computer. You ask him any question about any of that, and he could just rattle it right off. So anyway, Emily, Desmond, and I was the only 2 kids our age. The rest were older than us. And so we had this great crew. My buddies from 3rd grade who could get, and they would, 2 of them had, one way we did it during the school days, my buddies would get on the bus. Guy never cared. I said, these guys are from my class. They're going to, so they get on the bus. And they, this is like in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. And so not the weirdness that's going on now. So, yeah, sure, no problem. So they would just get a ride. And then my mother would not happy, but she was appreciative that I had friends, and taking them into town was fine. And by doing that, their mothers would also kind of do a little bit of the driving, or we would hang out in town. I would, instead of getting on the bus, I would be with them. My mom really loved that. I'm not there to do crazy shit. I always did. So anyway, from third grade on, I had this crew of, was me, J.P. Hoagland, whose parents were totally, their great-grandfather started a national NRA, right? So they had guns in their gene pool, right? Everyone was packing. I met JP first day in school. That school, the year I went there, everything changed in the school system. So it was a farm area with really rich people who had estates. That's how it was, right? And then as we go into the 60s, and they built the highways, Long Island Expressway, Northern State, Southern State, they now had like 12 lanes to go from Eastern Long Island to New York City, right? So from where I was, right on the border of Nassau and Suffolk County, Oldfield, and where Glen Cove is, and Islip and Oyster Bay, at Billy Joel, in the town of Oyster Bay, Long Island, right? And that neck of the woods, really beautiful. It's the North Shore, right? So there was a North Shore, so there was no kids there except farmer kids, and they had little red schoolhouses for those, right? Then as all the farms turned into suburbs, they made a big school district, North Shore School System. So they built a brand new high school, brand new middle school, and what had been the old high school became the grammar school. And that first year of that change, that's the third grade for me. So I went there, and I remember the first day in the cafeteria, I'm walking around, and every time I went to sit down with a bunch of kids, I you can't sit with us because all those little red schoolhouses were those, tables. So there were cliques. There were like 10 cliques in our grammar school of those 10 little red schoolhouses that got closed down, and all those kids got bused to it was in Glen Cove. And so anyway, can't sit here. And then I sat at an empty table, right? And I had my little bag with a peanut butter jelly sandwich, and I got a nickel to buy a container of milk. And I'm sitting down, and this kid comes up and looks at me and goes, "Can I sit with you?" And I said, "Sure. Yeah, sit on down." And he's wearing a suit, pants, leather shoes, a white shirt, vest, and a jacket, right? And I'm just wearing blue jeans, Keds, t-shirt, and my little baseball jacket, right? Anyway, so we're sitting there, and he has a picnic basket, right? And he opens up the picnic basket, and he puts out a little tablecloth and napkin and fork and a knife and a spoon, and he takes out a thermos. And he then takes out this kind of Tupperware thing that has meatloaf and mashed potatoes, another one of vegetables, right? And I'm going, wow. And a thing of gravy. And it smells like unbelievable. And he looks at me at the paper bag and goes, "What do you have?" And I said, "Peanut butter jelly." He goes, "Peanut butter jelly? I love peanut butter jelly." He goes, "You want to trade?" And I said, "That's right, Skippy, let's do it." So I got up, he got up, he sat where I was sitting. I sat at the, made up table for me, and man, and she had, fresh baked bread, brown and pumpernickel, right? The dark pumpernickel and the stuff that's like rye bread. It was and fresh whipped butter. It was like unbelievable, right? So I am just loving that. And he opens up the thermos. He's got 2 cups, and I have the milk. We put the little milk in the cup, puts the coffee in there, and oh boy, it was just great. So we are just, we're talking about this, that, and the other thing. He talks to me about his family, and he then goes, "Do you want to see my gun?" I have no idea what that means, like a secret word or what your gun? And he takes his jacket, opens it up, and he has a holster, and he has a Walter PBK, which is James Bond gun. Takes it out. First, he takes out over here in his holster. He has this little pack. He pulls that out. He opens it up. He puts out a silk handkerchief. Then he takes the gun, puts it on that, and in a little box that has a brush and an oil and a couple little tools. And he takes the gun apart, takes the clip out, and he said, never have a bullet in the chamber, never, right? And always have the safety, and shows me, the safety and the this and the that. Then he takes the clip out, see, full of bullets, and then he takes the gun apart. Now we're in a cafeteria with about 300 kids, and there's like 4 or 5 teachers, but they're all smoking cigarettes. Everyone's smoking. The whole cafeteria, it's like got a haze of smoke over it. And the teachers aren't even, unless there's someone screaming, the teachers are just talking to each other, right? They're not like looking at us or anything. And he's got this gun on the table in parts, and he's explained to me how it works and where it goes and what it is. And then he puts it together, puts it in his holster, puts the tools away, and the bell rings, and we're done with lunch, right? We walk back, and he puts his, picnic basket into his locker, and I'm like, like 10 lockers. So I'm just 10, you're 89. I am like 93. So we're almost neighbors. And so we're walking, and he goes, "So you're not in my homeroom, but what's your next class?" I said, "I have Mr. Diamond for art." "Oh, so do I. So we're going to be in art class together." I said, yeah. Sounds like fun. So that was J.P. Hoagland, right? So we're working on, and I'm kind of, since, a year before 3rd grade, I wanted to be an architect. My Uncle Steve was an engineer, and he did all kinds of, you name it, he did it, right? And so he gave me a drafting table and all the drafting tools, right? And he showed me how to draft because, as an engineer, he did drafting. But he also was talking about, he gave me a book about architecture and all the different great architectural whoop-de-doos. And so I'm reading that and looking at that. I'm going to be an architect one day. Yeah, that's me. I'm going to do that. So I started designing houses and shopping malls and stuff like that, right? Anyway, and rocket ships. I was also into being a rocket scientist. So anyway, so that was what I was really interested in. And GP was all about guns, period. And so he goes, we're walking out of class. We had these tables where you drew, right? So he just gave us a pad and he says, just draw anything. JP drew a gun, and really great gun, right? And his favorite gun, or the gun he would design if he was going to make a gun, right? Because he's being taught how to be a gunsmith by his family, by grandpa and his dad and his uncle. Anyway, so JP's doing that. Me, I'm like drawing a house, right? And a modern kind of house, lots of windows. And anyway, so that was Mr. Diamond, who was our art teacher. And he looks at us, and he looks at it. Everyone else has stick figures, and JP has an amazingly designed gun. And I got an interesting looking kind of house, right? Like it came out of an architect magazine, because that's what it did, right? So that was in my head, and I was like, and so Mr. Diamond looked at the two of us, and he goes, "Well, you guys obviously you're partners. I'm going to just assign people partners, but obviously you might need a girl. I think I'll find you a girl." And this is 3rd grade, right? So he goes off, and now JP's turned his thing, and he's now doing another design for something else, and I'm still working on my house. And Mr. Diamond brings us Lisa Stiles, right? And he said, "You guys," he said, "Lisa, this is JP and this is Owl, and they're going to be your art class partners, right? You guys are going to work on projects together, and you're going to help each other, right?" And I could see that Lisa didn't quite fit in. And she was like a little upset that no one embraced her. And I said, right away, I said, I love your pigtails. And I love the little bows you got on your blouse. And I just love the way you ensembleized. And she's like looking at me like, are you a girl? And JP just was like, he didn't have anything to really say. And he didn't know what to say because JP had no idea about genders, or the only female he knew was his grandma and his mom. He had a brother and a dad and uncles, and that's kind of it. Anyway, so she kind of looks over at JP's gun. She goes, "Is that a gun?" And JP said, "Yeah." And she goes, "I really like guns." He goes, "Do you have one?" She goes, No. I could never, no one in my family. But I don't know why, but I just am. And so, yeah, I said, Lisa, you know what? I'm going to move over. Why don't you sit between me and JP, right? So if you want to look at guns, you want to look at a house, right? So we were like this pretty amazing. Once I did that, and it was great because I wasn't the boss or the chief or any of that. I just would suggest things and it would be the thing they were thinking about and wanted to do. And so they were happy that someone said what they wanted to do and gave them permission to do it. So because she was like way over there on that side of me, I said, Lisa, sit between the two of us. So I'll move over. So that was our art crew, Lisa Stiles, JP, and me. And so that was the beginning of our crew. She had these other two friends who were also outside because they were Italian, right? And really Italian, but cute little girls. Debbie Soul and Kim Romano. And both of them their fathers were mobsters. And these girls from like their parent, and those two girls, even though they came from two families, those guys were mobsters since they were teenagers, right? Were in that scene, right? Their parents were in that scene in Brooklyn. They moved to Long Island to take over Long Island, right? And they're it was like The Sopranos, right? And so both those girls were like sisters. And when they were 2 years old, their fathers got them a Japanese martial artist and taught them from 2 years old, right? Martial arts. And they were in Brooklyn, and then they moved out to Long Island to one place, and then they moved to Glen Cove because it was like the new, nobody was doing shit there. And there was a history of it because it was a place where boats could come in. So when there were smugglers, I mean, that was a big, like Glen Cove was a big cove where smugglers came in, and Oyster Bay was another smuggling neck of the woods. Anyway, and it's because it was in the Long Island Sound, between the rest of Connecticut and Massachusetts and, Anyway, Lisa introduced us to Kim Romano and Debbie Soul. And so the next week, there were 5 of us, JP, me, and the 3 girls. And then the next to show up was Harvey Kleiman, because I was I had this geometry class, right, and science. It was like STEM before STEM, and the only other kid in that was Harvey Kleiman and Vincent Salvatore, right, another Italian boy. And Vincent was like a real short. I wasn't the tallest kid. I was probably maybe 4'8", and Vincent was like 4'2", right? And the girls were like, 5'5". I mean, they were like 10 inches taller than us. And the girls were really tall. And anyway, by the 3rd week, that was the crew. And then Matty Law came. He came in before Halloween, and he was the only black kid in the whole freaking school. And his father was a lawyer in New York City. And he had 2 other brothers and 3 sisters, and they had a nice house up there in the middle of nowhere in the farmlands, and so no one cared. But he was a really good lawyer. He was a corporate lawyer, And his grandfather was a lawyer, and his great-grandfather was a lawyer. And his grandfather and great-grandfather were judges, right? So that's why their name was Law, right? So, Matty Law, black kid. And he was like a cross between a movie star and a librarian. He was a librarian. He really loved the library, and because of him, and because we were like a crew, by the time we hit fourth grade, we had so Mr. Diamond was our art teacher. Mr. Morales, who was some kind of Spanish or Mexican or but he was really high class, high quality. He was like a rocket scientist, right? He was a physicist, but he was teaching us math, and he was teaching us what was known then as advanced math. So we mostly studied geometry. He said geometry is the secret of everything. Algebra, trigonometry are just jokes. They are, because they don't have computers. This guy in the Navy, right? And during the Second World War and Korea. So he's more or less a computer programmer, but he said everything is an algorithm. And that is one side of geometry. Most people don't know this, but that's how we were taught. And we also had a biology teacher, and we had Mr. Care, who was our language teacher. She, taught us, writing, literature. We read books. She also knew French, so she was teaching us French. And so Mr. Morales also kind of tried to slip Spanish in there. So our little crew was really like the advanced kids. There were a couple other kids who were kind of smart, but they didn't know what to do with it. We were like socially adroit, right? And we had this crew. So who else? Vincent Salvatore, Vincent Tufo. His father was a dentist, and so he was going to be a dentist, but Vincent Tufo I think he was secretly gay, but he didn't know what he was. There are a lot of people who are, I had a friend in Freeport when I was real little. His name was Teddy Werner, and his brother was Jimmy Werner, and they were German. And I had a tricycle. That was my sister's. I always got everyone's hand-me-down. And I was riding down our driveway. It was a big hill, and the tricycle got away. Like my feet came off the pedals, and so I stuck them up in the air, and the thing just went faster, faster, and faster. And I was trying to keep myself from, crashing. And I didn't notice Tenny walking in front of me, and I ran him over. Boom! And it was good. I hit him, because otherwise I would have made it out into the street and probably gotten run over by a car. But I hit Teddy, and we have a crash, and we're all tangled up in the tricycle. And he looks at me, and he's like underneath the bicycle. I'm kind of on top of him. And he goes, "Hi, I'm Teddy. You want to be my friend?" I just ran him over with a tricycle. "You want to be my friend?" So Teddy and we were tight. And right off the bat, I didn't even know what gay people were, but that was Teddy. And he walked on his tippy toes, and he was, sardonic is the word for Teddy. He would say stuff that people didn't even understand what he was saying, but I would laugh hysterically, right? Because my mom was sardonic. And Mrs. Werner was definitely sardonic, but basically an alcoholic. So my mom, Mrs. Werner, was my mom's drinking buddy, because she just kind of lived across the street in Freeport from us. And we had the big house, and they had a littler house. And my brother, whose friends were the Smiths, were all the way down at the other end, almost on Sunrise Highway. And they had like 6 boys, and every one of their boys, their first name ended in a Y. Timmy, Bobby, Kenny, Larry, Stevie, everyone was. And by the time we moved from there, when I was in 3rd grade, But I should have been almost in the fifth grade. But in first grade, I got murdered by the Nazi nun, and I ended up all beat up, and it took me 4 months to get out of the hospital. And then I ended up in this sanctuary in Garden City, Long Island, which was beautiful and nice, and was run by the Maryknolls. Not every Catholic order is sick in the head, right? Maryknolls were all about healing and understanding, and they were just really smart about everything. And there were all these, and the guys and the girls lived together, and they didn't have the nunnery over here and the place where the priests are over there. They were all together. They had their own little rooms, and they lived as a community, something healthy, So they all were like brilliant. Half of them were, oh, I'm a double doctor. I have a doctor in this and a doctor in that, So that's where I got to be, decided I was going to be a double doctor. Anyway, so by the time we hit, Glen Cove and Glen Head and Oyster Bay, I was probably 9, and I was in the third grade. So I was shorter than anybody. No, Vincent was shorter than me, but I was still a peewee, and I was 9, and soon to be 10, and in February. I'm an Aquarian. And so I was older by almost a year of all those guys, right? But I was shorter, so I kind of fit in, right? And we were, like I said, we were miles, light years ahead of anybody else in that school, because they're just, kind of country folk, give or take. Or because all the rich kids who had a really good education went to private schools, right? By the time we hit fifth grade, we were considered, smart, and that we, because of Harvey Kliman's father worked for Sperry Rand, they had a thing called Young Scientists, and so we would go and out to Grumman Aerospace. Sperry was right next to it, and they were the Grumman Aerospace. They were making flying saucers. They had really. And they had, Sperry had the UNIVAC, and they had the biggest computer in the world there. And so we were learning how to, Mr. Morales would take us out there. And Mr. Diamond also would go. And Mr. Care would go too. There was about 6 of us and 3 of them. And they loved that, going out there more than anything, more than their class. And so because of that, somebody in the corporate world, their kids were going to the private school in whatever that private neck of the woods is, which was kind of just in the foot of Suffolk County, right on the line of 107. That was the county road. I cut the 2, going north-south. Anyway, and Huntington was there. That's where C.W. Post College was just starting to be built. And there were 3 institutes of higher learning. And so we would go to that private school, which I forget the name of, and we would kind of go there. And we almost taught, we were in this, they had a gifted thing. And those kids were dumber than doorknobs because they were rich kids, but they were smarter than the other ones. So we went there to supposed to be getting some kind of smartness from them, but they were dumber than. That's when I realized money did not define, because everyone that were in my crew, my parents were probably, they were upper middle class, and the rest of my folks were, except for the mobster girls, they were even Matty Law. His father was in a basically corporate. He was the token black guy, and did not officer, but law stuff that the corporations could look, see what good guys we are. We're doing this kind of stuff. So he did everything of that, community kind of lawyering for poor people, by the rich people. And he got paid pretty good, but the access to things that he got were like way high up. So he was like, had political connections, stuff like that. And so did the mobsters. And so 6th grade, Matty Law's dad started working for the mobsters because they realized this guy's a really good lawyer, and they could Anyway, so it was quite an interesting little community, and where we were, where I was anyway. Hey, Mr. Anderson, really loved the fact that we would go swimming in his thing, and we'd have lunch with him and stuff like that. He'd take us on trips into New York in his limousine, and we would go over to where the horses and Emily was, and she had no friends, and now she had like 6 really good buddies, and the girls were really sweet to her and really nice, and the boys thought she was cute, and we all learned how to ride horses. And we're like teeny weeny things on these gigantic animals. And so I learned about horses from Emily. Desmond loved Emily. And he was like 6'3", and she was like 5'5". And Desmond just loved her. And Emily just loved her horses, and once she got a crew to have fun with, she loved that. And the fact that we all kind of, and it was like a 300-acre place, and they had meadows that you could, gigantic, like 2 miles long, and they were flat and nice. The horses loved to just take off down it, and didn't they go around the thing? They just went one end, and they could go around the fence. And we played cowboys and Indians and really rode those horses like, and the ground, even if you fell off, yes, I mean, I think, all of us who fell off, I don't think any of us. Vincent didn't ride a horse. He couldn't even, that was like an impossibility. So the horsey thing was not him. He played with the dogs. He liked the dogs. So him and Desmond was almost too big for the horses. I mean, he wasn't, but it was just, he was so smitten by Emily, he would just be looking at her on a horse and fall off and nearly kill himself. He didn't know how to fall. So Vincent and Dee would go play with the dogs. And we all played, we took care of the dogs. I mean, so the dog guy and the horse guy loved us. We cleaned the barns out. We cleaned the kennels out. We took care of the animals, and Desmond is becoming a vet. And I mean, the parents loved the fact we were doing this. We were there having a great time, staying out of trouble, being see, these kids, these are good kids. And when we would do really stupid things, which we would, I remember one time so they started building all these houses out in these farms, right? Started building cul-de-sacs. And we'd go and watch them build stuff and ask questions. How do you build, I'm wanting to be an architect, so I'm like, how do you do the levered wall and the this and the that? And these guys, we'd watch them. This one guy would kind of explain stuff to us. And then when they'd have garbage wood, they normally would burn it or bury it and say, can we use this to build forts? Sure, just get it away from me. Take it to wherever you're taking it. Just get it out of here. So you didn't have to pay to get it taken away or burn it or bury it. Anyway, so we had tons of stuff like that. But sometimes we got a little carried away with kind of taking stuff. And those guys knew we would take it. And they said, did you take that saw? Did you take that hammer? Oh, yeah. We just it is. And I remember we got carried away with borrowing stuff. And one time we got a little in trouble with that. But the police knew who we were. Everyone knew who we were. And the girls, their daddies were mobsters, so pretty much no one messed with anybody. And so by the time we hit 4th grade, 5th grade, we were all, Kim's and Debbie's father. They had this guy who, when they lived in Brooklyn, they brought him over to teach the girls and some the mobster boys and girls how to protect themselves. And then they brought him to Long Island, where this guy opened up. In the back, he had his, Hambu, his class, and in the front, he had a newsstand because the Long Island Railroad was right there. He had comic books and magazines and penny candy and all that kind of stuff. And so he was our sensei. He was our teacher, so we were super respectful to him. And we would, not all at the same time, but we'd all kind of go in there and sit and read the magazines and the comic books and all that kind of stuff, right? And we would see kids from our grammar school and the middle school come in and, get candy or cigarettes or whatever. And I would see certain kids stealing penny candy. He had the penny candy. And I saw this when I lived in Harlem. Same exact thing. Where the kids would steal because the penny candy wasn't like penny for a piece. 1 penny, you got 4 little pieces of candy, like bubble gum or a chocolate gumdrop or whatever, for a penny. And I mean, that shit didn't cost him a nickel, right? So he had these mirrors up, he could see everything, and he'd see these guys steal the stuff. And every now and then he would kind of corner them and say, "Hey, stop stealing. It's not good for you. Don't do it." And they would see it as, "Oh, this guy's Mister, because everyone knew he had the martial arts school in the back, right? But it was really just for us. He didn't really, put out the sign saying, "Hey, I'm teaching this." This is like 1960, 61, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. So anyway, I would notice this, and he would see me, and one time, and this happened to me twice. Once when I was like 3, and then here when I'm about 9. Both of these candy stores I hang out, and pretty much they were almost exactly the same, but one's run by a Japanese guy, the other guy is an Italian guy. Anyway, so both of them said to me, you're an interesting young lad, and I both times I said, "What are you talking about?" And they both basically say the same thing. You're a slick guy, but you're honest. You don't lie, cheat, or steal. I've been watching you for a year or two now, especially, man, if I lie, cheat, or steal, my Mr. Miyagi would have thrown me out on my ear, but, that would never happen. So anyway, I learned that, and when I grew up in Harlem for those first years, I learned a lot of respect for people who were righteous and honest, and I never lied, cheat, or steal because I saw people who did. There was no upside to it. I saw other people who didn't, and saw that it wasn't. If you didn't lie, cheat, or steal, you always got a better deal, right? Meaning you could control your own life. You weren't in the mix. You were outside the box, right? That's what I saw. So anyway, all growing up through grammar school, by the time we hit 8th grade, we were no longer the outside. We were the cool kids. Everybody wanted to join our clique. No, we called it, we were the cadre. You were sorry kids, nice. Go play. Go be, the cute girl. Flick your hair. Go be the football. We weren't really. I remember every year we had to. There was a kind of you had to be able to run around the field, and had to have a certain level. The federal government's trying to make people somewhat healthy, right? So you had to be able to do stuff. And we just, the jocks, we could run faster than they were, lift more. The girls were stronger than, by the time we hit 8th grade, those girls, Kim Romano was dating the varsity football team's coach. She was that, whoa. So anyway, that was my grammar school. And so going into high school, my brother and sister was in that high school. So I was on the bus with high school kids. We were going to be it in that high school, right? That was the myth, the cadre's going to be there. And I remember one day, we get off and I'm playing with my friends and it's, we get out of school in end of May, maybe first week of June or whatever it is. And so we're playing around, and my mother says, "Oh, Al, you're going to go to camp." Now, my parents sent me off to camp, and when they wanted to take a vacation on their own, they would ship us out places so they didn't have to worry about this. So I thought, so where are you guys going? Oh, we're going to be here. So why do I have to go to camp? She goes, well, you're going to a seminary for high school. I said, seminary? Is that a place where priests go? Isn't that where Cardinal Cushing's always talking about? That's right. He's got you into a seminary, and you're going to be a priest. I said, wait. No, I don't know. No, because I've already, I have 3 really tight girlfriends who aren't my sister we used to play spin the bottle and all kinds of fun. We never did anything because we learned biology. So we realized that you can fool around, you can do all kinds of stuff, but the other stuff, you put off. You just put it off. You do all the other kind of stuff, you can fool around, and that's fun. That's cool. And you can be like what they do in the movies, all that kind of stuff. That's really cool. You can do that. But the other stuff, you wait. You don't do it right away. You wait till you get married, right? So we understood that. So it was like it was it was okay. Everyone was, and the other guys were like, um, I saw kids getting, pregnant in 8th grade and freshmen in high school because our schools were right next to it. And we shared certain facilities, so we were 7th, 8th grade where we had classes and things in the high school because it was on the same kind of campus. Anyway, so we were really everyone. I remember one time when we were in 7th grade, and we had already been in the young scientist thing for about 4 years, and let's see, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, yeah, maybe 3 years. Anyway, so at the young scientists, they kind of cut us off from other kids, and they wanted to study us and see why we got along and why we worked as a team, and why we, were kind of going up the ladder faster than anybody else. How could that be? And every level, and you're not really freaking wanting to be this, that, or the other thing. You're just doing your best at doing everything. And they wanted to know why and how and what did the school system do right for us and it really was what it was the community that we were all so different. We all came from different everything. And all those families, I mean, I hung out with the Hoaglands, and I went to an NRA camp. We all went to an NRA camp. And it was like going into boot camp. And that's when they taught us the history of the NRA. NRA was started after the Civil War, and the North almost lost the Civil War because all the Southerners knew how to shoot. Northerners didn't know. And so the federal government said, we're going to have all these wars. So we have to have at least 25% of the male population to know how to shoot a gun. I mean, shoot relatively well. And that's why the NRA started. That's how it got started. And it was basically funded by the War Department, right? So anyway, we went to the NRA camp out kind of way out in Suffolk County past Islip. And it was nice. It was over near this place called Oldfield, where the really rich, the nice beach, old, right where we were was right, all these big, beautiful old houses, and but it was on the North Shore rather than the South Shore. Anyway, so that was so I learned how to, shoot an M14, which was the standard weapon issued to U.S. Army soldiers in the Korean and Vietnam War before the M16. And the 14 was like a big gun. It was taller than I was until right around 8th, 9th grade. I did a big spurt. I went from about 5'7" to about 6 foot in that year and a half. So anyway, but back then in 5th grade when I went to that, I was more like 5'1", and that gun was almost as tall as I was, right? And it weighed about 20 pounds, but man, it was accurate, even without a scope, just with its sight. So we learned how to break it down, how to clean it, just like in the military, That was we slept with our gun. No ammo, but the gun. So we did all kinds of, shooting. And we shot all other kinds of guns, too. At 50 caliber, boom, 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 boom. So, and that was, JP's family were started, the grandfather started that camp. So I got a big exposure, like 5 years of NRA. And NRA was all about gun safety, right? And nothing about you did not turn the gun into a thing to worship. It was a tool, dangerous tool, could do certain things, and that's what you used it for. You didn't use it to intimidate. You used it to hunt and to protect. And we were also taught, because we knew martial arts by the time we went to that camp, one of the counselors was also a martial artist, and he was really into teaching all the other 80 kids martial arts, where you don't need to use a gun. You're not always going to be carrying your M14 with you. And so basically it was really cool because he had us as the demonstrators. We knew it really well. We could go up against him, right? And sometimes he'd have us all attack him at once. And it was like, he was Anyway, so it was loads of fun because we were kind of the teachers. Those kids would call us sensei. That's kind of where I got used to it. Anyway, so like I said, I had a life that most people can't even imagine. And it was no big deal. It wasn't because I was rich or this or that. I was just in the right place, the right time. And I didn't go, well, what should I do? I just kind of went with the flow. I got out of my way. And lots of bad things happened to me. Getting murdered by a nun in first grade, that would intimidate most people. Beat up so bad you can't see out of one eye, can't hear out of one ear, and you can't talk because your esophagus was crushed, so you can't barely breathe. So to talk, you have to have breath, right? So they had to teach me how to breathe in a different way, how to project, right? And my jaw, it's like, 2 degrees over this thing it should be here, but it's really kind of right there. So I used to get a really bad stutter. I still stutter. I can still stutter. But I was taught by this linguist, the Maryknoll nun. She was a audiologist and a linguist. And so she taught me how to listen really well to the conversation, to understand it 100%. So don't speak unless you have something to say, which is her basically thing. And that thing you're going to say, you think about, and she said, you put it in the tape recorder in your head. And then when you're ready to say what you're going to say, when it's just the right time, where it's just appropriate, just where people are not saying anything and they're going to listen, you say this thing you've already put it on the tape and you just play the tape. And I got to learn how to do all of that in a nanosecond, right? And that's because of Sister Mary Ellen. So, always in the right place, the right time. 2 hours and 34 minutes. It's 10:15. Let's see if you guys have been saying anything. Awesome. Let's see. Read my comments. Okay, I'll go back and read your comments. I'll do my best. That's right. Leave comments. More thumbs up. Let's see. Got strong arms. Yeah, and rolling around in a wheelchair gets you strong arms. Look young, 44. Yep, well, I'm 75. I got a 75 look, and I'm kind of beat up too, so I got that interesting look thing going on. Dr. Larry, good to see you. Said hi, okay. Solar, lots of thumbs up and smiles. Good to see you, Solar. Say, I believe. Thanks for believing in me. I believe in you, Kathy. 1940. That was a good year. Let's see, are you? And no, I'm in Tennessee, kind of between Mountain City and Johnson City, Freaking you out. I'm good. I hope it's a good freak out. Freaking out is not bad. Good. Let's see. Yes, sir. Okay. How do you send funding to you, our brother? Well, okay. This is an experiment. I have I don't even know what I'll have to figure it out. But it is, I can't believe it's on my email. So, oh yes, my email is thedudewake42@gmail, right? And then I have I forgot what it is. It's it's not PayPal. I gave up on PayPal. Those guys are, but there's another one. What's it called? But email me and what is it called? Can't believe. See, when you get old, you get these little, things that stop you. Zoom. I think no, it's not Zoom. Zelf or Zell. Is that what it's called? Zell. Something of that nature, right? And it's like, so. But the Dude Awake, I think it's Zell. I'm not even know what it is. But get a hold of me at my email and ask me, and I'll find out, right? So, but I don't bet on it. And so Zell, I think it's Zell. I'll find out. But get a hold of me at the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, right? And I will find Monday or Tuesday, and the next shows I do in the, after Monday, I will, in the beginning of the show, hey, good morning, good evening, welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensie Owl Bob, blah, blah, blah. I will say, and if you want to drop something into my account, it is this at Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, right? So I'll do it that way. So Monday, Tuesday, somewhere in there, I'll find out that info and put it on there. So it'd be nice, like I said, giving that lady, it was truly amazing. I mean, that's like being in the flow. I had no idea. I hadn't used that account forever, and it was not only was there $75 to pay that lady's groceries, but I got 40 in cash so she could have a little cash. And what truly blew my mind is those Christian people behind me were, why are you doing that? Why should you do that? I said, didn't you ever hear the Good Samaritan? But just because she was black. But I knew she was a nurse because I looked at her shoes. She was wearing nurse shoes, right? So I knew she was a nurse. And she was doing at two different hospitals so she could pay the bills. She had 5 kids. I said, so how old? I said, well, the youngest one is 10. So the other ones are out of the house. She goes, not yet. So you got to get those guys out. You got to get them out when they're like 12. You just got to get them out. Anyway, so, I mean, I was out on my own by the time I was 9. I mean, I was at prep schools, meaning it's kind I was at that, sanctuary, when I was 9, 9 and 10. Wasn't at my, and I grew up with my grandma in Harlem, not in, that's why I'm African American. That's melanin challenged, and we're all Africans. You tell, and there is no such thing as white people and black people. All there is pink people and brown people. Think on that one. There's a thing called Middle Nation. Go check that guy out. I like that guy a lot. So, okay, kids, 2 hours and 42 minutes. I think that's enough. My throat is getting a little peaked. And yes. Okay? Okay. Love you guys. Do.